You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Jack Elsom from The Sun and Kezia Dugdale from the University of Glasgow's John Smith Centre. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the expectation of UK and US forces striking Iranian-backed Houthi rebels from Yemen who've been targeting shipping in the Red Sea makes the lead in the eye. The Guardian too says both countries are poised to launch airstrikes at any moment. Likewise, The Times, airstrikes on Houthis after strife in Red Sea. The Financial Times, meanwhile, reports that Iran has raised the threat to shipping in the Middle East by its seizure of an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. The Mail says the strikes would serve as a warning to Iran over its backing of the Houthis. The Metro leads with the news that former England football manager Sven-Göran Eriksson has terminal cancer, with the headline, "I have a year to live and I appreciate every day." That story is also the main item in tomorrow's Daily Star. The Mirror pictures Prince William with rugby heroes Rob Burrow and Kevin Sinfield, who've received CBEs for their fundraising for motor neurone disease. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Jack Elsom from The Sun and Kezia Dugdale from the University of Glasgow's John Smith Centre. Welcome to you both. Let's start with The Guardian and this story developing tonight. We know there's been the full cabinet call with Rishi Sunak, which we presume has now ended, the result of which we don't know. But the headline in The Guardian saying that Britain and the US are poised to launch strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. Take us into this story, first of all, Jack.
Well, yes, most papers tonight banking on airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen by British and American forces within the next few hours, we understand. You don't hold a late-night cabinet meeting, square the lead of the opposition, call in the Speaker of the House of Commons unless you are going to use military action immediately. And I think this is really the inevitable point now after those warnings, those final warnings from not just Britain, not just the US, but about 12 Western countries against the Houthis in Yemen, telling them to stop their attacks on the Red Sea. Those have been unheeded. There's been 27 attacks now on these ships going through that vital shipping route. And so I think that this was the logical conclusion. The West now has to have that projection of strength, try and make the Houthis stop. And I think, obviously, the inevitable question now is, what's Iran's reaction going to be to all this?
Kezia, do you think military action is inevitable at this point?
I think given the week that we've seen, the answer is undoubtedly yes. So just as Jack describes, there's been 27 incidences. 21 of those incidences were on Tuesday night, which is what led to the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps yesterday to say, basically, enough is enough, watch this space. Today started with a meeting of Cobra, followed by the National Council. Now we've seen the Cabinet all on a call. So something very serious and significant is undoubtedly about to happen.
And Jack, we hear reports that the Houthis say that in order for them to stop their attacks in the Red Sea, what they're calling for in their support of Hamas and Palestinians is that there be a ceasefire. This is unlikely to force America, the UK and others to actually call for a ceasefire, is it?
Completely, and I think that they are just going against, and the desired effect of what they want, I think, is just going to be set back by their actions here. There is no way that the West is going to change their international position on Israel after ships going through that quite vital shipping lane are attacked by them. And I think that what they need to do now, and what they're definitely almost certainly going to do in the next few hours, the US and Britain, is launch those airstrikes. And, you know, this is a critical shipping route for many people. You know, 20% now of... 20% less ships are going through this vital shipping lane. Having to go around the Horn of Africa is just adding millions of pounds onto these trade routes. And what it's doing is pushing up prices for people in the UK. And if you think for 1 second that this is just some far-flung conflict going on in the Middle East, that's not going to happen because, you know, prices on the shelves go up for this. It's a really big issue and it's going to be dominating the headlines for the next few days.
But, Kezia, any military intervention, any military action taken by the US and the UK is going to escalate the wider conflict in the area and will cause contagion. It's only going to get worse.
Oh, absolutely, and you can see that in The Guardian, where you have the leader of the Iran-backed group, which controls the north and west of Yemen, a guy called Abdul Malik al-Houthi, saying basically any American attack will not remain without a response, pointing very quickly, if you hit us, we'll hit you back. And the question is, to what extent does this escalate? To what extent does Britain want to get involved into this? Is this one-day action and it's going to lead to weeks or months of action? And actually, that will be why a lot of people will be wondering tonight whether the Prime Minister is right to do this largely on his own, and having just made a few critical phone calls, might it be the case that Parliament needs to come back and discuss some of these issues? Will that happen tomorrow? Will that be something that waits until next week? I think we need to wait and see.
Jack, this is a huge test for Rishi Sunak's premiership, isn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, it's the first military action he is launching as Prime Minister. It's a huge moment for any Premier with those positions and with those tools at his disposal. And obviously, he'd be consulting his cabinet on that tonight. Obviously, the question of Parliament, he doesn't need Parliament to launch military action. There was a precedent set in 2011 with Libya. But obviously, you would expect, and what you're seeing MPs call for tonight is that parliamentary cohesion around it, and I think that will only grow louder in the coming days. MPs wanting a say on this, even though potentially, obviously, you can't stop military action because you might want to consult Parliament beforehand. Obviously, these things are immediate pressures. However, in the coming days, you're going to want to see MPs being consulted on this, and that's the clamour which I think we're going to have, and we're already starting to see coming over.
But Kezia, as Jack says, the decision can be taken tonight. I mean, possibly could have already been taken. We don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And we've already seen some of our ships use the capacity that they have already to bring down missiles and drones that have been attacking these commercial vessels in the Strait. What we're considering now is slightly different, though. This is about airstrikes. From what I can read in these articles on land, these are about military targets in Yemen where the Houthis are based. That is a significantly different thing, requiring different assets to be released. The question then, though, is to what extent are we attacking these bases? What are the targets? I think we're right to expect a degree of scrutiny and debate about just how far we're about to lean into this with the Americans by our side, what other countries will join us, how significant a story is this going to become. It's really interesting that the Houthis are describing that their focus is on tackling ships which have connections to Israel and trying to frame it as part of the Israel-Gaza conflict, when really for the Western countries, this is an economic issue. This is about trade and the access to that strait, and it will be trying to protect that shipping channel that will be the foremost of Western countries' priorities.
Jack, interesting point that Kezia makes about targets, because if you're going inland, presumably civilians might be casualties in any attack.
Yes, and obviously I think the West will try incredibly hard to minimise civilian casualties. The question obviously is, where do they attack? Is this naval port routes, which they've been using to mount these attacks? And then what happens next? Is this going to be a one-off attack, which is almost designed to send a message to the Houthi rebels? Is it going to escalate into a wider campaign? Will it drag in Iran? These are all questions which tonight we are still searching for, are going to come clearer through the fog of war in the next few hours and days. But they're critical questions which I think we're going to need answers on tomorrow, because so far tonight we have obviously got things out of government, we know there's a cabinet meeting, but apart from that, the details remain pretty scant, and I think that is what a lot of MPs and obviously the public are going to be calling for tomorrow morning.
Yeah, certainly speculation tonight, as you say. The Eye saying that targets would most likely include ports where boats are used by Yemen rebels, where they're based. So they're suggesting that the targets would be actually the ports used by the Houthi rebels. Let's move on to the Eye. No, we've just done the Eye. The FT we want to get on to. You mentioned Iran and really what sort of role they're playing in all of this, Kezia.
Yes, so this is interesting. This is describing the seizure of an oil tanker off the coast of Oman. So this is a different part of the Gulf Street, a different part of the shipping channels that we've been discussing so far tonight, which points to a wider issue here about what's happening in the broader region and Iran's overall role in controlling different facets of that region. And that should make us more worried, in fact, that this isn't just a one-off issue about a number of rebels in Yemen, that this is much broader, it's much more orchestrated, and that it could escalate much faster than we're perhaps prepared for.
Yeah, speaking to a commentator tonight, they're suggesting that potentially this could even see an attack on Iran, because we know that they are financially backing the Houthis.
Yes, completely. I mean, this is not seizures of the sort of Somali pirate ilk. These are trained rebels who are very well armed, very well financed by Iran. And let's not forget, Iran is a massively armed power in the Middle East, and I think that any conflict which drags them in is going to be really, really worrying for a lot of people. And, it poses the whole question about what is going to happen after these strikes. Is it going to be that signal message? Is it going to be a wider mission in Yemen, potentially dragging in Iran? At the moment, Iran is pretty happy by disrupting stuff in the Middle East. If Britain and America are having to pay through the nose for sort of longer shipping routes, they're going to be absolutely laughing. We know they don't like the West. We know they're happy to disrupt. And I think that the question now is what happens going forward. If it does drag in Iran, that is going to be very, very concerning for a lot of people.
Well, if the US and the UK attack the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, then it stands to reason that Iran will become further involved. Do you not think, Kezia?
It's a sentence full of common sense and inevitability about it. And I think that's why we should be concerned about the democratic oversight here. This decision to take these strikes in the next 24 hours is right and just, of course it is, but we also need to put it in the context of what happens next. We've got clear indications, we've had them from days from the Yemeni rebels, that any sort of retaliation from US and UK forces will see something in return as well. So this is really scary, dangerous times for us all.
And do you both think that the US and the UK would be justified in going ahead with airstrikes on the Houthis? Jack, you first.
Well, it seems that they are comfortable with their position. It seems that tonight Rishi Sunak has probably authorised that military action, obviously unconfirmed at the moment, but we are expecting that in the next few hours. I think pressure would then mount for a UN resolution to continue this operation. Obviously, that can't be done at the drop of a hat, and that's why obviously the US and the UK, having talks tonight, feel probably quite comfortable in their position. However, if this is going to continue, then I think that obviously a UN resolution might be sought.
And do you think that they would be right, or do you think that they should show some restraint?
It makes sense to me that limited action should be taken to protect a route which contains 15% of our global maritime trade business. That's a very different story from one we could be discussing in 2 weeks' time, which is about wider escalation of conflict in the Middle East fuelled by conflict with Iran. The question for me is, how does one day's action take you closer to that, and whether we've really talked about that enough and what this might mean in the future?
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, the Sun's Jack Elsom and Kezia Dugdale from the John Smith Centre. Let's continue going through the papers, and we'll turn now from the Middle East to the Post Office inquiry and start with The Guardian. Today, Stephen Bradshaw, the Post Office investigator, was questioned himself. The phrase that came out is that he's been accused of acting like a mafia gangster. Kezia.
Yes, I mean, this has been the dominant domestic political story of the week, and we've got evidence here from a guy called Stephen Bradshaw who's worked for the Post Office since 1978. So that's an extraordinary length of service doing the job that he was doing. The main story here in The Guardian, however, is that this guy has admitted to the inquiry that people were offered lesser charges if they were prepared to stay silent about accusing the Horizon system of being faulty in some way. That's really significant. That was a core part of the documentary that millions of us or drama that millions of us have watched over the past few weeks, that was so critical to so many people losing their livelihoods and having the most desperate time for decades. This suggestion that the Horizon IT system at the heart of their post offices was faulty. They were being told, if you basically shut up about this, we can get you off with a lesser charge. This guy's admitted this to the inquiry today, and that's hugely significant.
But Jackie also denied being heavy-handed in terms of his language when dealing with people.
Yeah, completely. And over the past few weeks, we've seen the heroes of these scandals really come out. And now we're seeing the villains laid out in the full public glare. A lot of what we saw, especially laid out in that ITV drama, was these sort of intimidatory tactics used by a lot of these investigators. Now, it was put to him that he acted like a mafia gangster mobster in pursuing these postmasters. He has come out and refuted that and said that he didn't act in that sort of manner. However, I think that in these spiky exchanges today, a lot of people who have watched that drama and seen the subsequent fallout from it will be thinking, well, actually, what we saw on our TV screens, which was a real-life drama, and I think that people will really sort of think, actually, potentially, that may not be just the whole truth.
We also heard him deny that he had said to people that they were the only ones in coming forward and having glitches and having problems with the Horizon system.
Yeah, that's really interesting because he's clearly been caught out and kind of proven a number of other facets to this case in the evidence he gave to the inquiry today, but denied that particular instance, which was a core part of the TV dramatisation, the suggestion that every time a post office investigator was in front of a sub-postmistress or master, they were saying, "No, it's only you, you're the only one that's ever complained about this." And he still stood behind that sentiment today and said he had never suggested that they were the only one. Looking at the Mail, though, actually, there's a lot more background detail, and just picking up on Jack's point about these bullying tactics. What I thought was extraordinary about his evidence today was that one of the victims, or one of the sub-postmistresses, Shazia Sadiq, actually sat next to her lawyer and listened to this guy give evidence for the whole day. And she's on record saying that this guy phoned her 60 separate times as evidence of the bullying and intimidation that she faced. And the strength and courage it must have taken to eyeball that guy and listen to this for hours today is really quite extraordinary. And it speaks to the phenomenal campaigning efforts and resilience that hundreds of these people who worked as dedicated public services in our post offices for decades have shown, fighting for justice and fighting for what's right.
The Times are pointing to recordings that prove the Post Office knew about the IT problems, which is crucial and at the crux of this whole issue, isn't it, Jack?
Completely. And one of the most shocking, staggering pieces of information from Bradshaw's testimony today was that actually when he signed a statement saying that he didn't have any problems with the Horizon scandal, that was actually written for him by a law firm. I think people find that absolutely shocking that he himself didn't do that and was told exactly what to put. We now know that obviously Horizon was completely faulty and led to these shortfalls in the Post Office. And I think that anyone that thought that yesterday's statement by Rishi Sunak for compensation drew a line under this is going to be mistaken, because there is a huge scandal here and people will rightly want to know exactly what happened, get to the bottom of it. And yes, if people deserve to be punished over that, then that punishment should take its course of action.
Yeah, more and more being revealed day by day. Jack and Kezia, thank you very much for the moment.